Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. We're into March, and Revive Ministries, we're kind of reminded of the hard first steps when we are trying to make either a change or a new direction. A lot of times when it comes to these kind of things, they can be very terrifying. I think about Black History Month, and I think of Rosa Parks and what she said. I've learned over the years that when one's mind is made up, this diminishes fear. Today, I'll be speaking deeper on this with a new guest, Billy Lahr. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight. Having a conversation on what it means from different perspectives of what it means to take that first step. Thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to give a disclaimer. Obviously, in the States, if you are in crisis, I would like a lot of times these topics, maybe not directly, but they can stir up. And I just want to know those who are listening that in the States, it's 988 is a suicide crisis lifeline. I do encourage you to find whatever help you can get. I don't like reinventing the wheel, especially working in the mental health field. So if it's a church group, if it's just your bowling team, whatever it is. And if you could ask those three words as an adult, like, hey, I need help, I do encourage you to find it. And, ask that question. I always say things like, well, not things, but I always say that people say it better than me, Billy. Karl Barth, I'm going to start there and we'll kind of start the topic. He says it this way: though no one can go back and make a brand new start, anyone can start from now and make a brand new ending. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
I'm actually thinking about the last 8 months and how they have not gone as smoothly as I had hoped. And a lot of it, I've spent some time thinking about, if I could do these 8 months over, what would I do? How would I do these differently? And it's interesting because I think, I probably would have made the same decisions, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm able to take a look at where I am now,
Mm-hmm.
and just move forward with things. And I'm kind of in, I host a podcast called The Mindful Midlife Crisis. That's sort of where I am right now. I'm in this transitional period in my life where I worked in education for 21 years and I've been traveling for the last 2.5. I'm in Hanoi, Vietnam. I'm going to Chiang Mai, Thailand tomorrow. And it's people are always like, oh, you're living your dream. You're living the dream. And it's like, I enjoy the freedom, but at some point in time, there are things that I'm missing. There's that level of stability that I'm missing. So just trying to create, I think, first some inner stability, and then moving forward from there. So I do like this quote, and as I was reading it, I'm like, oh God, this is me the last 8 months right here. I'd love to do the last 8 months over, but I can't. So then how can I do the next 8 months in a way where when I get to the end of 2024, I can look at the year and say, hey, things didn't start out the way that we had hoped, but we finished strong, and there's definitely been some growth there.
Yeah, and I'm always reminded that we're really bad at remembering things as human beings, and I would say that if I remember the lessons I've learned, then nothing's wasted, in the regards to that. And a lot of times when we think about our lives, it's always unfinished. If we really think about it, like we start off, we get somewhere, and then we go somewhere else, and then we try to do this. But I think what I find to try to help is the internal validation, external validation. We need both, but when external becomes the main motivator, it can lead us to some places that we kind of ask ourselves, how did I get here?
Yeah, and it's interesting that I feel like that's maybe what's kind of led me to this realization here, 8 months of how much external validation have I been seeking,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a big part of that comes with just
Mm-hmm.
traveling for so long. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, you have these transient relationships with people
Mm-hmm.
for time, and it's like just wanting to go where there are connections, and I don't necessarily want to go back to Minnesota where I'm originally
Mm-hmm.
from. I lived the first half of my life there, so now where are other opportunities? And what's interesting is that I of the 2.5 years I've been traveling, 10 of those months have been spent in Seoul, South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually where I have felt the most at home, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
I've spent so much time there.
Mm-hmm.
And in August, I actually start a job there, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking forward to that. But then there's kind of this in between of what's going to happen between now and then. And what I've actually done is I've taken stuff off of my plate,
Mm-hmm.
because in the previous 8 months there were things that I was doing that
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I needed to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I had been doing for a long time, but it's like, nah, I don't need to do this anymore. I'm going in a different direction. And
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to go in a different direction. And it's okay to recognize too when it's time to quit.
Yeah.
I think we too often praise people for grit, and we don't praise people enough for quit. Annie Duke has a great book. I think it's called The Power of Quit. Annie Duke is a
Mm-hmm.
legendary poker player.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why poker players are successful is because they fold the overwhelming majority of their hands. They are able to recognize when A, they have a potential winning hand, or B, they're looking around the room and they can sense that, okay, I can play this hand right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm someone who I'm a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. And if people are listening and they're like, dude, you sound like you're pretty intense. You kind of sound like you're a spaz. You teach meditation, you meditate. I do. I practice meditation so that I can be this level of obnoxious, because if I didn't, I'd be an out of control a-hole. So I practice meditation just to kind of keep myself in the orange and the yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And through that meditation, I've developed an awareness of what is bringing me, a sense of purpose, what is bringing me a sense of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, they talk about pride being the deadliest of the seven sins. I think there are things that we do,
Mm-hmm.
especially if we're solo entrepreneurs. There are things that we do that we don't let go of because of pride.
Mm-hmm.
And Annie Duke talks about how long can you live doing this thing with it still giving you the same result. And she calls that, there's due dates. She calls it a death date. When are you going to stop doing this thing? When are you going to stop being in this toxic relationship if things don't change? What are the qualifiers? What's the criteria for a change for you to continue going on? And if this thing that you're doing, or this relationship that you're in, or what have you, this job that you're doing, if these things are not being met, then when you hit your death date, then you have to make that change.
Yeah.
And those are things that in the course of the last 8 months, as I've been thinking about, okay, what direction am I heading, and what am I currently doing? Is what I am doing benefiting the direction that I am heading? And there were things that just weren't. And
Yeah.
I've been able now to say, all right, I'm taking that off of my plate. Pride prevented me from doing it. And grit did too. I wanted to grit through it. And at some point in time, I was like, you know what? I have the awareness that this is no longer serving me, and it's time for me to let this go. So I feel like having the awareness to know when to quit and when to grit is really, really crucial as we navigate challenges in our life.
I think that I also I think about the power of walking away. The
Hmm.
idea that um, it's very, I like how you mentioned grit. I've also been a leader in church, and you kind of see that a lot. Unfortunately, some people feel that their value hinges on them appearing and being as active and foregoing their own self or health issues. And unfortunately, it's the idea that, like you're saying, I think there's a lot of wisdom in walking away. I think there's a lot of wisdom to saying, hey, you know what, this is not serving me, and having that, that hard kind of looking at yourself in the mirror kind of conversation. At the same time, there's this enoughness. I read a book on like this idea that we're kind of never really enough, and we're kind of spiraling over this like unrealistic expectations to what would be ideal for us. And I think I kind of look at the model of when we're kids, friendships change. I'm not friends with my kindergarten friends. I don't even know who they are. But like when you get older in high school, you have friends, in college, you try your best to hold on to them and all this stuff, but your priorities change, your values change. I wish the best for my college roommate and all of them, but we're not in the same kind of um, area in our life, and that's okay. And I
Hmm.
feel sometimes we put so much pressure on just holding on, and despite ourselves, despite what, and then we're like, well, we're being good. I think I also read a lot about the idea of nice. What does it even mean? I like, as kids we're told to be nice, and it really kind of makes me think, because it's like nice means to not be such a nuisance. Nice means to kind of navigate through life, being less of a burden, less of a kind of a problematic person for others. But where does self come in there? Where does self reflection, and what does it mean? So we can make a pivot, and we can say, you know what, this is not ideal. And for some, it's scary. And that's why I found this topic of taking the first step very ideal. Like, it's one thing to say letting go, it's another thing to say, I'm going to do something new, that most people be questioning, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, there's
So,
two things that you mentioned there that I want to touch on. The first
mm,
is there's a difference between being nice and being kind.
yeah.
And I liked how you said when you're nice, it means that you're not trying to be a nuisance. I'm from Minnesota. We are the kings and queens of passive aggressive behavior, right? So, we say things to people in this passive aggressive way because we want to avoid conflict. And like, I'll
Yeah.
readily admit, like I have a tendency to avoid conflict too. I'm a
Mm,
recovering people pleaser. So this idea of being nice, but when we're kind, we're saying the thing that needs to be said, but we're saying it with compassion.
mm,
We are giving people constructive feedback in
mm,
a way that helps them reflect, learn, and grow. Now, they might not enjoy that
mm,
feedback, but it is what is kind. Because
mm,
if we are nice, then really nice is just another word for enabling.
mm,
And there's another thing that you mentioned there, and I think about this too as an extrovert, someone who has a big personality who likes. I feel way more comfortable in front of a group of 100 than I do in front of a group of 2 or 3.
mm,
So I like the crowd. I like having an audience, that kind of thing. So I think one of the best pieces of advice in terms of staying in contact with somebody is I got from a former guest of mine. Her name is Jennifer Walton. I think it's episode like 95, 96, right around there.
mm,
She talks about being your own chief brand officer.
mm,
And she's so great at just marketing herself. She talks about, I don't market my business, I just market myself.
mm,
And she's genuine and authentic in her relationships, and she talks about, these are the people that I keep in my 5.
mm,
And what she means by her 5 is that there are people that she tries to contact at least 5 times a year.
mm,
People, and it could just be as simple, hey, how's it going, or commenting on their social media, oh, you
mm,
look fabulous today, or it's just something small.
mm,
And she does it 5 times a year. That's not even once every other month. It's just 5 times a year where she stays just in contact with them in some capacity. And to me, I think that that's really beautiful, and it takes the pressure away from those of us out there who feel like we need to stay engaged with each and every single person. And if you have a large following or something like that, that's really, really hard to do. Now, is it important to continue and stay engaged with people? Yes. But I also think too, and this is one thing that I'm really learning, is that the virtual audience gives off an entirely different energy from an in-person audience. So how do we continue to nurture those in-person relationships and not just nurture the current in-person relationships, but then seek out opportunities to build other relationships in person? Through, whether it be through a church community, or whether it be, I'm a huge advocate of Meetup as a traveler. I'm a huge advocate of Meetup, and I'm also now just getting more into these Facebook groups that are in different cities. So like I said, I'm going to Chiang Mai. I joined like 4 Facebook groups, things that I don't like doing those kind of things, mostly because I don't need my feed just plugged up. But I don't look at my feed. I just look on the group and be like, oh, what's going on? Or, hey, I'm Billy coming to Chiang Mai. Here's some of the things I'm interested in. Who wants to hang out? I'm looking for live music. Who wants to go? Or who's going hiking this weekend? Just kind of stuff like that. And then you are able to curate a group of people who will help you explore your curiosities, especially if you're someone who, as I'm a recovering perfectionist as well. I'm a recovering a lot of things, but I'm a recovering perfectionist, and there are times when like salsa dancing, I want to learn. I walk around Hanoi, and every night there are ladies out here doing salsa dance calisthenics. It's so much fun to watch, and I like dancing, but I'm someone who just kind of dances to the beat of my own rhythm, but when I watch Latin dance, I'm like, this looks so much fun. And I remember when I took swing dance lessons in college, how much fun that was. But then you get that self-consciousness that's building up inside of you, and it's like, oh, what happened? I'm not as good as this person.
Oh yeah.
But if you can find yourself in a room full of beginners, that's actually it. Or sometimes even people who are just maybe a step or two above you, it feels a lot more inviting. I've been going to yoga here recently, here in Hanoi, and I am not flexible. I see the people doing that, but it's such a welcoming community. The teachers there are so great. It's called Om Hanoi. If anybody is ever traveling through Hanoi, check out Om Hanoi. They've got great vegan food. I'm not vegan. I'm a full-on carnivore, but they're wonderful people, and the vegan food is there, and the yoga is really a wonderful experience too. So I've been diving into that more and more, just because I'm like, okay, this feels good when I do this, and it's releasing a little bit of that self-consciousness about being inflexible, and maybe that's even a metaphor for just kind of being more flexible and open to more opportunities.
I was thinking about a lot of pressures are about the uncertainty of, we're talking about taking the first step. There's a lot of uncertainty, and sometimes we like to box it. Like, we can't really box it in a little neat package. I do love when you were talking about the curiosity. A lot of people don't know this with Albert Einstein. There's this quote from him. He says that I don't have any special abilities. I'm just passionately curious. I think as a kid, and I think you mentioned when we start looking, oh, they're better than me, I'm not very good. There's something that happens before that. Who's the best dancer? Everyone's raising their hand. Who's the best singer? Everyone. Like that kind of. When I think of the word curiosity, and it's a word that really has been building a lot of weight and traction, and when I think about these things, is when you think about curiosity, it feels like life. it feels like there is some life there. Like if we're kind of just saying, okay, this is just how it is, it does feel a little gray. When we stop learning or stop being curious, it does feel finite. It feels like there's limits. But when we are curious, even if we're not good at anything, we can learn a lot about ourselves. Continuing on that thread, Alice Walker says it. This one quote that I thought was interesting on kind of what we're saying. It says the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. It's kind of this contrasting idea. Sometimes the things we try to control end up we're really not in control. That kind of incongruencies of what we think is happening. But what are your thoughts when you see this quote for yourself, from Alice Walker?
Well, I kind of connected to what you just said there, in that we lose boldness, we lose confidence, we lose a bit of cockiness.
Nah.
And these are, it's not so bad to be cocky. And I feel like over time, in my 20s, I know that it was like, for me, it was just obnoxious cockiness, all right, just borderline. I don't know that I was necessarily arrogant, but it was just, I am good at this. Everybody watch me. Take a look at this, star of the show kind of thing.
Yeah.
And though I've learned a little bit of humility, there is a sense too where it's like, no, own it.
Yeah.
Own what you're good at. And
Yeah.
when you talk about curiosity, to me that is so important to finding our purpose in life. We have to understand what our strengths, our weaknesses, and our needs are as individuals. And then once we're able to do that, then we can use that to explore curiosities. What are things that still kind of, questions that we have? What is it that we want to learn? What is it that we want to get good at? And as we do that, then we reach out to communities. We reach out to people who are in that same curious area. And those people provide different perspectives. They open opportunities. They show you things that you're like, oh, that makes things a lot easier. And that then progresses your curiosity into the next phase. Okay, now how do I figure out this next thing? It's almost like playing The Legend of Zelda. It's just it's something along those lines, or Super Mario Brothers, what have you. You're going through these different phases and figuring them out. Why do we keep going back to them? Is because we want to understand them. We want to accomplish. We want to achieve. And when we have that sense of accomplishment, or we have that sense of desire to figure things out, we reach purpose. That is how we find our purpose in life. And people often talk about follow your passions. Please don't. Stop telling people to follow your passions. That is complete and utter nonsense. Passions is a byproduct. It is not a starting point. It is a byproduct. So if you're delivering a high school commencement speech this year, please avoid saying follow your passions and telling them that. Instead, tell them figure out your purpose, and then multiply that purpose by consistency, discipline, patience, and self-compassion. That's what passion is. That's a byproduct. A lot of people will talk about, yes, you need the consistency, you need the discipline. A lot of people don't talk about the need for patience and self-compassion, especially when you're a beginner. I think the other part too that people do is they too often tell us that our passion and our purpose need to be our career. No, they don't. Sometimes a job is a job that pays for you to do the things that you're passionate about. And that's okay too. Like, you got to eat. So have a job and let that job serve its purpose. And the purpose is to fuel that passion. And that's fine too. So I think people too often, as I'm kind of trying to come back here to this quote, is that they think to themselves, well, I'm not working in my passion. I'm not working in my purpose. And I would ask people to stop and think about, well, wait a minute. Is that
Mhm.
necessary? And is it, if you don't know what your purpose is, if you don't know what your passion is, let's sit down and let's
Mhm.
talk about these areas. Go through your strengths, weaknesses, and needs. Now let's really do a deep dive of what you're curious about. And
Mhm.
now how do we connect you with people to help you explore those curiosities even deeper? And then we found our purpose. And then the next part is the really hard part, because the
Mhm.
next part are all those things are tangibles.
Mhm.
Looking at your strengths and weaknesses, yes, those are intangibles to an extent, but you can look at those and identify them. And if you don't know, just ask somebody; they can tell you.
Mhm.
And in your curiosities, those are things, I mean, again, they may appear to be intangibles, but they are things that you can access. They are resources that you can access. And the people, your crew, your community, those are tangible. But then learning the consistency and the discipline and the patience and the self-compassion, especially the latter two, those are the
Mhm.
intangibles. And those take a lot of work, and they take a
Mhm.
lot of time,
Mhm.
and they take a lot of intentionality. They take
Yeah.
a lot of awareness. They take a lot of mindfulness in order to cultivate those. So when you're able to do that, then you're able to restore your power and debunk this narrative that you have to be working your purpose or working your passion.
Yeah, and I totally agree in the fact that it kind of restricts it and it kind of narrows it. It's like, if what happens if because a job can be just a job. A job could be, it could be in the field that you like, but then you have to deal with people in that field, and whether they are in line with what you're thinking. So I do feel you gotta be careful with that. And another thing that I was thinking about, started off with a quote in the beginning about Rosa Parks, but I also thought about some civil rights, just the idea of it was never done organically. Let's be honest. Like, if you don't understand something, you're not going to sit there and be like, okay, we'll get it in time. Especially when it comes to your purpose, the curiosity. I just, I feel it's kind of the childlike approach. You're not looking at who is right at the point when you're really curious. You're looking at what is right for you at that point. So, a lot of times when we play this game of, I think there's a lot of innocence that can cultivate from the idea of being curious, because at that point you are a beginner. You're not awesome sauce. You're not anything, but you're just curious. And I feel sometimes you get the more honest derivative of what your feeling is, and the simplest form of what you're feeling is usually the what is a foundational pour in what direction you may want to go to. Switching gears, I want to ask, you're a new guest, but I also ask returning guests, but you know does it give you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself? I know you shared a bit all along the way. Anything else you want to share, or any comments that will be? I know there's a little question that I was going to ask. I was going to put it up. I think I just could ask you, what have you seen help others or yourself overcome some of the fears regarding our choices? You can answer that, however order you want to do, and a little bit about your story that led you to where you're at today.
Yeah, so I think for me, I think my story really starts around 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was really struggling with my mental health. I
Mm-hmm.
was dealing with rejection in my personal life. I was dealing with rejection in my professional life. And things were, I was having anxiety attacks, and those
Mm-hmm.
anxiety attacks were manifesting into depression, and that depression was manifesting into suicidal ideation. And at that time, I was talking to my best friend who has this PhD in forensic neuropsychology. Not a bad best friend to have,
Mm-hmm.
but we were having I was sharing some pretty intense things. And he said, listen, if this is the way that you're feeling, you need to go and talk to somebody, because what you are saying, that is not normal.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, all right, you might have a point here. And I think the real turning point for me it was December of 2013, and I was going to go to a birthday party for me, a birthday party for a friend. And I remember saying, all right, at 7 o'clock, I will take off. I'll get to the party around 7:30. But at 6:51, I had this anxiety attack. And it wasn't any more debilitating than any other anxiety attack that I had. But when I have anxiety attacks, I can feel it making its way up from my stomach into my chest. And then I can feel my shoulders hunching over. My hands will crinkle up. It's hard for me to breathe. It's hard for me to focus. And I don't know how long it lasted, but it lasted long enough for it to just completely wipe me out mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so I texted my friend and I was like, hey, I'm not feeling well. I'm not going to make it to the party. Sorry. And I woke up the next day and I'm like, what's wrong with me? It's the weekend. Isn't it my job that causes me all this stress? Why am I feeling this on a weekend? Why am I avoiding seeing friends that I haven't seen in a long time that I was really looking forward to seeing? So with my best friend's words in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, I need to do something about this. So luckily for me, I lived right around the corner from a psychologist's office. And I took a look at who all of the therapists were there, and I sent my best friend the resumes or the CVs, the bios of everybody, and I'm like, you know what I need, pick one. And he picked a woman named Mindy Ben-Dixon. And anytime I do a show, I always give a shout out to Mindy Ben-Dixon because she's the person who introduced me to mindfulness. She's the one who helped me navigate these thoughts and feelings of anxiety and depression, so that I was able to, even though I still have anxiety attacks still to this day, they're far less intense, and I'm able to navigate those in a much healthier way, in a less self-destructive way, in a way that doesn't minimize what I've achieved over my lifetime. And as I was going to her on a regular basis, I was started to, like I said, feel a little bit better. And she would give me these mindfulness practices to do at home. And as the new school year approached in September, I was feeling pretty good mentally. I was in a good place. And I remember October rolled around and I had sophomores. They were the same students I had as freshmen. And one of them said to me, Mr. Lahr, you seem like you're in a better mood this year. And I was like, well, there we go. There's proof in the pudding right there, because my energy was so different that it was palpable, that teenagers were experiencing me differently, that I was experiencing them differently. So I was just in a better place. And one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me is, Billy, reason why I like you is because when you're excited about something, you want everyone else to be excited about it too. And I thought to myself, gosh, if this mindfulness thing can help a nut job like me, I wonder who else it can help. So the teacher in me kicked in and I wanted to learn more. I got curious about, what the science behind mindfulness, and why is it that when I meditate for 10, 15 minutes at a time that I feel better? Like, how does it impact the nervous system? What is it doing to change my brain? So in learning more about that, then I started leading mindfulness sessions with staff. I started doing speaking engagements about mindfulness, and now I'm a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. And it's interesting as I talk to people, they say like, I really should practice this. I really should practice this. But I think they're kind of in that same mindset of, well, I know I should do this, but I'll do it on my own, or I'll do it when I have time. And they lack that intentionality around it. To me, I don't think it's any different than people who say that they're going to go to the gym, or they're going to learn how to play an instrument, or what have you. It's all these things. I know I should. Mindfulness is a lot like vegetables in the sense that they're healthy when we consume them, but how often do we really consume them when there's something more delicious or distracting over that way? So again, it takes this intentionality around it. And I know there are people who are like, well, I don't want to practice in a group, or And it's like, no, that's actually the best place to do it, because people will say to me all the time, I don't think I'm any good at meditation. Well, you are. If you're practicing it, you are. Like the failure, excuse me, the practice is in the failure. Because as you realize, as you come to awareness that you are no longer focused on your breath or the sound or whatever is going on, the awareness is that, oh, I've lost focus, and now let me bring myself back to this.
Yeah.
And each time you're able to come back to the present moment, especially if you're able to add non-judgment to that awareness, the more passionate, or excuse me, the more compassion we develop, the more curious we become, the more open we become, the more focused we become, the more relaxed we become. And it's in those practice moments where we can then translate that into game time situations, like difficult conversations at work or difficult conversations at home, where we allow ourselves the space to experience a stimulus, and rather than just go to a reaction, we hit mindfulness, then we realize that we have a choice, and then with that choice we can respond. So it's not necessarily even creating a pause so much as it's slowing things down. And the brain moves at lightning speed anyway. So how do we just slow things down a little bit so that we are responding because we are aware of, oh, I am operating from this emotion right now.
I want to say I really appreciate you mentioning mindfulness. I served in the U.S. Air Force. After that, part of my story, some people know, I went through mental health treatment. I went through all that stuff, and for me, the biggest turnaround through all I was going was mindfulness. Like, I still do it today. Honestly, like you said, I've gained a lot of insight because we're too close to it. A lot of times we're too close to the situation at hand. I think the turning point for me, just to piggyback on how important mindfulness has been, is the non-judgment part. It provides that avenue and bridge to forgiving yourself, which is the hardest thing. So a lot of times when you're going through a lot of stuff, you're not even thinking about forgiveness. You're just feeling like, I feel like all this stuff and it's building up. But if you're able to get to the part where the non-judgment observer, you're the observer, non-judgment to yourself, then you can kind of get to the point. And I feel, at least for me, in just one angle of what mindfulness, not to take up the time on that, was forgiving myself. And then I got better at being compassionate, not to myself, but to others. And that was really a turning point, especially in the recovery and to where I am right now. So, like, I commend you. A lot of times I don't hear enough about mindfulness. So,
well, let me add something to that too, because had it not been for Mindy Ben-Dixon, I would not have mindfulness as a tool in my mental health toolkit. And I think of thoughts like those old school bingo hoppers, right? So our thoughts are tumbling around in there all the time, and they're the same thoughts. They're oftentimes the same thoughts that tumble around over and over and over again. And you think about those, the bingo balls, they're just bouncing all over the place in their little tube. But what if there was something that we could practice where those same thoughts were there, but we were able to slow them down? We were able to actually see them, and then, they pull the chute or whatever, and then you're able to pluck out that bingo ball, and you're able to look at that bingo ball, and you're able to say, oh, okay, all right, now I understand then too what emotion is tied to this thought, so that when this thought comes up, I feel that this is the emotion that's connected to it, and then here's also where I feel it in my body. All right, now I'm gonna put that thought back in there, because you're not going to eliminate the thought, but now what you've done is you at least developed a different relationship with that thought, so that when you see it again, you're like, oh, there's that thought that I sat with before. And it's so important. Again, I don't learn how to meditate. I don't learn how to be mindful without Mindy Ben Dixon. And people out there who are like, well, I'll just meditate on my own. A, no, you won't. You're not going to meditate on your own. But then B, what is your preconceived notion of what it means to sit mindfully? Mindfulness is an umbrella, and meditation is just under that umbrella, but we can mindfully eat. I lead people through mindful eating and mindful coffee drinking exercises, mindful movement, all those types of things, right? So there's this umbrella, but the key is really processing how you come back to awareness with self-compassion, with non-judgment, because it's so easy, like we talked about at the beginning, to being this perfectionist. I'm doing it wrong. I'm not doing it right. There are no there are no awards for best meditator. No one gets the award for best meditator. It's just enough. There are times when I sit in full focus for the 15, 20 minutes. And then there are times when I'm never focused. But but again, it's the failure and then the awareness of coming back. So I really encourage people that if they are looking for a way to navigate or find some calm amidst the chaos of their thoughts, to work with somebody. It might be a therapist. Maybe that's what you need, right? Is going with a therapist. But if you're like, hey, I think I've got I think I got a handle on some things, but there are some thoughts that are stirring around in my head. I'd like to learn more about mindfulness. Hey, give me a call. I'd love to work with you on that.
Yeah, and I just want to also mention that I got direction. I couldn't do this on my own. Like my therapy through years and years, and just kind of. So those who are listening, it's not like you're just gonna will it. You're gonna have to get direction through this because it's very unorthodox. It's not like, oh yeah, this makes sense. It's like, this does not make sense. Why are we doing this? And you'll just keep doing it. That's it.
Well, and the double-edged sword about self-help stuff too is that as we practice awareness, as we practice self-help, all of a sudden a lot of guilt and a lot of shame show up because because we look back on, oh my gosh, why didn't I come to this conclusion before, or why didn't I stop? So then we have to process through that. So it's almost like climbing a mountain, and then you have to acclimate. So you get to a certain point. Okay, now we got to acclimate. Here we are right here. Now you're kind of sitting with some regret and some shame and some guilt because you did all this stuff. All right, let's forgive ourselves. All right, let's forgive it. Let's not lose, and let's be grateful for it. Let's not lose our awareness of maybe privilege or learning from those mistakes. But we can forgive ourselves, and now we can move up a little bit higher. And okay, now those thoughts, those feelings, maybe some different emotions are coming up. We need to acclimate, and we just continue the ascent. But in order to do that, we need oftentimes someone to help us process through all of that.
Yes. I want to ask you, I know you mentioned a lot, and I just want to give you an opportunity to ask these just two questions that I think are important to ask when you're thinking about taking the first step. And one of them is, what habits have you seen or implemented that have been helpful in staying intentional, taking a step forward? And you probably spoke on a lot of it, but anything you want to add or even emphasize, we'll just start there, and then we'll go to the next one.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously mindfulness is a part of my routine, but that's the key word, is routine. So routines kind of get a bad rap. Routines are actually really, really helpful. So especially having a morning routine, just kind of doing the same thing over and over and over in the morning. There's so many decisions that you're going to have to make throughout the day that whatever flexibility and autonomy you need, you can set that up throughout the day. But the intentionality of a routine in the morning is really what is going to set you up for success at the beginning of the day. So I think just taking a look at, and you're like, well, Billy, I don't have time for 15 minutes of meditation in the morning. Great. My morning routine isn't your morning routine. But I bet if you sat down and you just kind of did like a time inventory
Mhm.
of what it is that you're doing, you might
Mhm.
realize where the time sucks are. And I'm not saying that you need to maximize your morning, you have to optimize your morning, but you could probably do less of the things that suck up your time.
Mhm.
And in doing so, or you can find ways that, like, okay, hey, I like doing this in the morning, but how can I be intentional around letting that set me up for success for the next step in the routine? I
Mm.
used to have this facial, it's called a clairsonic,
Mm.
and I would use it in the morning in the shower. It's a vibrating exfoliating brush, and
Mm.
yes, I love using that thing, and it goes for a minute. And what I would do when I get into the shower, because I have all these thoughts when I wake up in the morning and get into the shower, is I take it and I put it on my forehead, and I just go forehead, right
Mhm.
temple, right
Mm.
jaw, chin, and I just go through wherever it is on my face, and that slows down my
Mm.
thoughts so that I can sort of I can move into the next steps of whatever my morning routine is. And each of those are cues. And when we talk about habit forming, understanding and recognizing cues are really, really important. So what is it that cues us into the next habit? So I think that's really important when we talk about taking intentional steps
Mhm.
forward.
Yeah, and I just for me, I like, especially as a new habit tied to something I already do. Like you said, the time management. Like if it's something that especially it's something solid that you do each time. You may want to, so you could, because habits are sometimes difficult, but the intentionality, like you said, is key. I like to ask myself why I'm even doing this. A lot of times, the base model is like, well, I'm gonna do mindfulness. Well, why are we here? Because the thing is, if you look the core reason, they're like, okay, let me make room because this other stuff may not be helping me at this point. That
Well, I think
self-discovery,
too.
yeah.
Oh, I think too, and here's what I'll say. And even John Kabat-Zinn, who's kind of the guru of mindfulness research, he says this: don't practice mindfulness if you look at it as something that you feel like you have to do. If
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I gotta meditate yet today. That is the opposite effect of what you want it to be. It's something, it should be, you get to do it. It's something
Yeah.
that you look forward
Yeah.
to doing. It's not something that you quote unquote have to do.
Mhm.
And I think too, as much as I admire someone like Andrew Huberman, you listen to his morning routine, man, that is completely something that I could not do having worked when I was working in education. Like, I
Mm.
wouldn't have been able to follow that morning routine.
Mm.
So
Mm.
you'd have to work what's within your parameters. Like,
Yeah.
what is it that you can do? But
Mhm.
again, sometimes it does take time to, you need to take the time to look at how am I spending my morning? What does
Mhm.
that look like? Are there little things that I could do? Here's something that I used to do. So my commute to work was about 25 minutes. So I drove to work.
Mm.
So 25 minutes. And my iPod, I had one of those old school thick iPods that had
Mm.
8,000 songs on it. And there
Mm.
were songs in there that I absolutely had never heard before, but I just
Mm.
had them on the iPod. And in that 25 minutes, I would just let the shuffle play whatever song it wanted.
Mm.
And I was not trying to search for the perfect song. I
Mm.
just listened to whatever song came on. So, what sometimes the thong song by Cisco come on because I had that on my iPod? Absolutely. What a ridiculous song, but I listened to it. I
Mhm.
listened to it. Or would there, sometimes, if you're probably around the same age as I am, you had CDs, and when you put CDs onto your iTunes, you'd have those tracks that had the hidden tracks.
Oh
So
yeah.
it'd be like the 3-minute song, and then there's 20 minutes of silence, and then there's like this stupid 1-minute song at the end of
Yeah.
it. But I wouldn't switch through it. So I would sit in that 20 minutes of silence. But that was all part of something that I was already doing in the morning. I just changed the need to find the perfect song during that commute. And then I turned it into another game where when I got to work, I would just say, okay, what were the songs that I heard? And then I would write down my commute playlist as kind of this memory game that kind of that would be the cherry on top of my entire morning routine. And I found that to be like really, really helpful because it gave me an opportunity to just be focused on some things on my way to work so that when I got to work, I could approach whatever is on my task list with a clear head and more focus.
I just want to also ask, and I think this is an important question to also ask is, what lessons? I know it sounds like you're sharing a lot of lessons, and I don't want to be redundant, but starting over, there's a lot of moving parts. So if there's anything you want to emphasize or anything you want to end as we kind of wrap things up, anything you want to add when it comes to the biggest lessons or some lessons you're still working through?
Yeah, I've started over so many times here in the last 3 years, and just trying to think about what direction am I heading. And I think that's a question that I ask myself quite a bit. And what's helped me the most is talking to somebody. For me, because I wasn't working during that time and I was just traveling, the first year I wasn't working with anybody. And after that first year, I was like, oh, I'm still really confused about where I'm going, and all this traveling and instability is really taking a toll on me mentally, emotionally. If I want to continue to do this for another year, I probably am going to need to work with somebody. So for me, the most affordable option was BetterHelp. And they have plans where if you are low income, they will give you a discount. And really, it's extremely affordable. I think my plan was, at one point in time, it was $180 a month for 4 visits. And I loved working with my therapist. I loved it. And sometimes you find the right match and sometimes you don't. And the beauty is you can just say, hey, this isn't the right fit for me. Let me go and try and find somebody else. I can't recommend that enough. Is just, if you're going through something, we talked about quit and grit. Stop gritting through it on your own and let go of pride and reach out to a professional. Yeah, your friends are great, but a lot of times they're just nice. A lot of times they're just nice. And so reach out and work with a professional in some capacity. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be me. It can just be someone that you resonate with. It'd be someone who you're like, you know what? I feel like this person here is what I need in this moment to help me get through this difficult time. Maybe you just need to work with them once a month. Maybe it needs to be more frequent. I kind of look at, like, your car is probably running smoothly, but it gets an oil change every 3,000 miles or 5,000 miles, however you want to do it. But it needs an oil change. Hey, you know what? So do you sometimes. So get that mental oil change.
I heard this. I'm paraphrasing. A little self-care is better than no self-care, because the idea is, at the end of the day, if you don't practice self-care, you're just gonna be what's left. If you practice self-care, you can be the best version you can be. So it's this intentional approach. I try to kind of, especially when I work one-on-one with clients, just to remind them they have a choice. All of us have that choice. And then we talked about several topics, mindfulness. I remember in the beginning, kindness. You mentioned kindness. I appreciate you mentioning kindness. I a lot of times say this, and it's I'm not minimizing those few people or watching those people who are struggling, but be kinder to yourself. I remember I said in the beginning, one of my friends, that one of the most notable final thoughts, and I'll get to yours, is that we're all unfinished. We're kind of like, we're so impressive, but also unimpressive at the same time. Not take yourself too seriously. It will take the time it takes. We not understand this in grief. We try to understand that grief takes time. Also, what your goals take time to. Wherever you're going takes time. This urgency, when you're able to slow down, like you mentioned in mindfulness, I wake up in the morning. I have a routine where I do progressive relaxation, go through all that, and then do my mindfulness. I do that every day consistently because I just that for me works. So like if it takes you 40 minutes to get out the door, but then you're at peace of mind, do that 40 minutes, whatever it takes. That are my final thoughts. Any thoughts you want to share, Billy?
Yeah, you you have no idea how much a text message to somebody will boost their mood.
Mm,
Just saying, hey, what's up? I was thinking about you. How you doing?
mm,
But then B, how much it'll actually boost your mood too
yeah.
when they get that when you get a response back.
Mm,
And here's the thing, there's that idea of there's no selfless good deed. Okay, if you're down
mm,
and you're like, hey, yeah, I'm just gonna see what this person is up to. It's been a while, and if you don't hear back from them, that's okay.
mm,
That's okay. They might be busy. You might be
mm,
busy, but there might be a little bit of excitement of just like, you know what? I'm curious what this person is up to. And maybe you
mhm,
send 2 or 3 messages like that a day. And it could just be, it's something that you can copy and paste. And then that
mhm,
way it's just easy. You just say, hey, what's up, Robert? How you doing?
mm,
Been a while.
mhm,
What's new? Boom. You send that message. You change the name, but you send that message to 2 or 3 people a day. That's 10 to 15 people a week. And you just find yourself like, oh, hey, you're re-engaging with people. And you don't have to keep that conversation going forever. But sometimes it's just nice
mhm,
to reestablish that connection. And then you never know. Maybe that person says, "Hey, let's get together," and they mean it. It's not a midlife let's get together.
mhm,
It's a genuine let's get together and
mhm,
hang out. Or let's catch up on a phone call. My former co-host Matt Hazard, he reached out to me about a week ago and he's like, "I missed your face. Let's get on Zoom." So we got together, we Zoomed. It was awesome. It was 90 minutes well spent. And it's just little things like that where
yeah.
you reconnect with people in just in a small way, or you have people in your fives, like Jennifer Walton talks
Mm,
about. It's really, really crucial to keep connected in some capacity, but then also find ways to do the in-person connections as well.
I think like even the smallest or the simplest gestures are the biggest ones. I sometimes think about being a leader in a church setting or whatever. One of the things that I always felt was more important wasn't what you said to them, was the follow up. Call them back. Let's just start there. I'm telling this to all leaders, anyone who's working with someone, just call them back if you can. Like try that because those connections do matter, and I do appreciate you mentioning that, Billy. Thank you so much for coming on. I know we could probably keep talking, but I really appreciate you coming and sharing your insight. It was really, really great to have you, Billy.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
I just want to say to those who are watching, listening, ReviveMinistriesFL.com is our website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast, leaving this last quote of wisdom from a Pakistani proverb. It says, "Pride is concerned with who is right, humility is concerned with what is right."